My name is Joanne Mangan, and I am the employer's lead with Grow Remote. If you want to learn more about Grow Remote and what we do, you can check out our website at growremote.ie, and you can listen back to previous episodes of the Grow Remote show on our YouTube channel as well. Just search up Grow Remote. So I'm really excited about today's session. Today we are talking about culture, engagement, and well-being in remote teams. These are often cited as challenges for employers, and we have three great remote-first employers on our panel, and they are going to tell us how they do it and how they do it really well. So we have McHugh, who is CEO and co-founder of Axonista. We have Cheng, Associate People Enablement Partner at Remote. And we have Coralli, who is Program Manager for Hybrid Enablement at HubSpot. So you're all very welcome today.
Thank you very much.
Great to have you. So we're going to try and keep this conversational, everyone. We definitely want to hear your questions. So please feel free to pop your questions in the chat. There's a couple of Grow Remote colleagues on the call here. We have Grania and Graham who are monitoring the chat and who are letting people in as they're joining. So don't be shy, do ask questions. We'll have some time at the end for a Q&A as well. So we'll get started. I think maybe we'll start with just quick intros. So we have three leaders in the remote working world, I think it's fair to say, on this call. So maybe just to get things started, if we could start with each of you doing a very brief introduction about yourselves, your organization, and where you guys are in the world. I'll start with you, Claire, if that's okay.
That's absolutely fine. And it's lovely to be here today. This is a subject I think many of us can probably talk about for hours and hours and hours, but we'll keep it tight. So Axonista is a video commerce company. So we enable things like live stream shopping for media companies and brands. And we've been around since 2010, but we really started getting into remote work probably in 2017. So a few years into it, probably know a little bit more about it than some people who are just starting on that journey, but less about it than some that have been doing this for much longer. And our team is about the size, we're 50 people, around 50 people. And we are in mostly around Ireland, I would say. There's a smattering of people in Dublin. We used to have an office in Dublin, we don't anymore. But we also have a team in Croatia and also in Spain.
Brilliant. So you're well distributed team around Europe particularly. Great. And I'm just going to bring in Coralli as well. Liz, if you can give us the same, just a quick overview of who you are and where you guys are in the world.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Coralli. Really excited to be here. I'm here for HubSpot. We're an all-in-one CRM platform headquartered in Cambridge, Massachusetts, but we have a global presence in 15 entities across EMEA and JPAC, as well as North America. I work as a program manager for our hybrid enablement team, which is a small but mighty team of 3, currently all based in North America. And I am joining you this morning from Denver, Colorado.
Lovely, very nice. And it's great to have you here. And we have finally, last but not least, we have Cheng from Remote. Hi, Liz.
Hi everyone, this is Cheng from Remote. So I am from Hong Kong and I worked in Japan for about 7 to 8 years in the past, and I just came back to Hong Kong about half a year ago. So now, I think about 2 months ago, I joined Remote and I'm now working as an associate people enablement partner here. So Remote, we are a company which enables our client company to hire talents from all over the world, not all over the world, but from many different cities and also countries in the world compliantly. So we ourselves is also a remote-only company, and we have employees from about 75 different locations in the world. And we were founded in 2019, and we now have about 900 employees. So it has been quite interesting and also challenging environment for us because we work in many different time zones. And I myself, I work in the APAC time zone. And yeah, it is also the first time for me to work in a full English environment. So personally, it has been a very interesting, also challenging experience for me so far. So I am so eager to learn from you all and also share with you what I have experienced so far in this company. And yeah, nice to meet you all. Looking forward.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. It's really interesting, the mix that we have of different sizes and spread all across the world. And I have to say a particular thank you to Liz Cheng, who is joining us from Hong Kong. It's 9 p.m. where she is now. So that's a real sign of commitment to the topic. So we really appreciate it. So let's get into the conversation. So we're talking about culture, engagement, and well-being in remote teams. And as I said at the start, these are often highlighted. If you look at the discourse around remote work today, these are often highlighted as challenges for employers. So I'm going to start with you, Claire, if I can give you the first question, which is, why do you think it is such a challenge for some employers? And what's your thought on that from your point of view at Axonista?
Yeah, so there's lots of different things that you need to do differently, right? And if you look for culture, like culture really is all about creating the right type of environment for your team to drive the strategy forward. That's a pure CEO answer giving you on culture, but and your values should be aligned with that, and everything should help move that forward. And I think certainly when we started looking at remote work, and I think how it started was one of our team said, "Hey, I'd like to go and live in Berlin, but I want to keep working with you guys. Can I do that?" And I'm like, that sounds like something in this day and age that's possible. And of course, as Liz Cheng will know, it was very, very hard to actually make that happen from a compliance point of view. But we started looking at it there, and it's like, oh, what are the things that we need to do differently? And I think it comes down to two main themes, and it's really about communication, and it's about information and quality of information and knowledge sharing and having up-to-date information and being able to create an environment that your team can interact in a way that suits them. And you kind of have to bring it back to sort of principles of remote working and really, really look at flexibility and choice as kind of the things that we want to build our remote work culture around. But I think one of the things, if you ask anyone who's well established on their remote work journey, the thing that's still a problem is documentation, or having the right information to the right people and onboarding them in the right way. And that's still a problem and a challenge that we're trying to solve, but something that we're getting better at every day. So yeah, those are the two areas that I think probably are the most difficult and the ones that you have to do the most work on.
Okay, that's really interesting. And I think if I bring Liz in, because Liz Coralli, you're operating a hybrid model in HubSpot, right? So you kind of an extra challenge in a way, because you have some people who are in the office and some who are working remotely, right? So how does that work in terms of your culture, and how do you make sure that everyone, regardless of where they're sitting, has that feeling of a shared sense of being bought into the company culture?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I want to echo what Claire said about communication. I think that communication at the end of the day is how models like a hybrid model or even like a remote model work successfully. If you're trying to take the culture or the environment that you had when you were exclusively in office and just pop it out of the office and then pop it into a remote or a hybrid world, you're going to come across a lot of roadblocks and a lot of challenges. So being really, really intentional about how you're communicating to folks and what the experience is like for folks who are in office and folks who are away from the office. Not just focusing on one or the other, but thinking about how do we best communicate with folks who are sitting in other time zones or who are sitting across the world from us in any capacity. What does it mean to feel connected to those colleagues? Being really intentional about all of those, I think, will go a long way when you're setting up a hybrid culture.
Great. And Liz Cheng, if I can bring you into the conversation, have you some practical examples? I'm sure a company like Remote, you've been doing remote working for a long time. What kind of practical things do you do to keep your team feeling connected and kind of embracing that sense of a shared culture?
Yeah, so we have been really intentional in creating time zone inclusivity because we work in different time zones. And we do have some all hands or team meetings or social sections, which are more, which sometimes hosts on the European and American time zone, but we ensure that we have another alternate week of those meetings held on the APAC and also European time zone. So we are like shifting it to ensure that people from different time zones can join it. And we have been emphasizing so much on doing async work. So because when we do work async, when we are not prompted to make responses or prompted to join in meetings to show that, okay, we are working, we are present. When we are like free from those constraints, people can work in the time which they prefer and they can still contribute. So yeah, we have been emphasizing quite a lot on working async. And if it is not necessary to hold a meeting, we usually just encourage everyone to work on notions and documentation. So it includes people from different time zones to contribute, and also to they won't feel left out because they are not in a meeting. So yeah, minimizing meeting and also enabling meetings in different time zones.
And I think the async culture is really important, and it comes up all the time, that idea that we don't have to do everything in a meeting. It doesn't all have to be done in real time. But I think one of the challenges there can be, how do you make sure everyone knows that that's the culture and that people don't feel pressure to immediately respond to an email or feel like they default to that, going for a meeting and bringing everyone in a meeting, all if they want to get something done? Like, how do you embed that culture of async working in your teams?
So we have been really over communicating it, not only to our internal employees, but also to our external candidates. We have a handbook, which is called Remote Handbook, which, on there we rewrite every part of our values and also how we prefer to communicate, how async communication means to us. And we deliberately write that we do not demand any immediate response. And because the leadership is also doing in the same way, like after I joined remote, after I observe for several days, I get to understand that, okay, everyone is doing like that. And we actually, on our handbook, we encourage our employees to mute the Slack notifications, so they won't be disturbed when they are working on some deep dive work. And after their focus ends, after they finish certain parts of their work, they return to Slack and reply them on their own choice of time. So I think, the role model of leadership is important, and at the same time, over communicating it is really, really important. And if we spot that employees are replying whenever they are pinged, our managers talk to them and let them know that they need not to be online all the time to get noticed, and they need not to be online all the time to be informed of what's happening in their own company.
Yeah, I think that leadership role modeling the behavior is really important too, because then the pressure is off the employees. If they see the leadership are doing the same thing, then they know that it's safe for them to do that too. Liz, Coralli, I'm going to bring you in here to talk a little bit about the idea that when you have premises, and I've worked in places like this, a lot of the sense of culture comes from there's posters on the wall and there's nice motivational speaking, phrases just up around you as you sit. And a lot of the culture kind of comes from that, being in the building, being very proud of the company you work for, and seeing those images. And how do you replicate that? I know you guys do have an office, but not everybody goes there every day, right? So how do you replicate that sense of belonging in a hybrid or a remote world?
Yeah, I think it's something that takes a lot of creativity, because a lot of folks, and understandably so, have traditionally always associated culture with a physical place. And so something that we've really had to invest in and almost reshape our focus on has been, how do we onboard folks when we're onboarding people remotely? How do we immediately pull them into a sense of culture? And so that starts in the very first week that someone starts at HubSpot. We have an entire week of foundational training where we talk about our values, where we talk about team building, laying expectations, the understanding of flexibility. And then we encourage our managers and teams that are bringing in new folks to immediately do team building activities. And we've gotten pretty creative with this over the last couple of years. We've done anything from virtual cooking classes to virtual nature walks to movie watching parties to trivia games. It's been something that we're always hearing different creative solutions. But another thing that we do is we don't try and deter people from meeting up in person. I'm based in Denver, Colorado, and we don't have a physical office here, but we have a number of HubSpotters who live and work in my area. So we also empower employees to meet up with their local communities of HubSpotters, and we give a stipend for folks who are remote, away from physical offices, to be able to do that. So I meet with Denver HubSpotters once a month or so for a drink or for a hike. And that also helps build a sense of community, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's probably one of the biggest misconceptions about remote work. I've been so surprised at how many people don't really get this, is that remote teams do still meet face to face, and it's quite an important part of it. It's just not what you do every day. Claire, I know you guys do in Axonista, you do a lot of activities, virtual activities. I know you had a wellness week, which we'll talk about, because we're going to talk about wellness in a little while. But what's your experience in Axonista on that? Do you guys meet? Or
Yeah.
how do you generate those activities? Is it virtual? Is it face to face? A little bit of everything.
I mean, we do a lot of stuff, and I think that's the thing, is you actually have to put a lot of time and effort into it. So we use Huckletree for meeting in and doing kind of workshops in teams. So our teams will meet up. So like function level teams will meet and plan and do that type of thing. And we did that on last week, actually. We had a lot of stuff towards the end of quarter 1 that we wanted to prep for quarter 2. So we had some team meetups with the Ireland team, and we went whiskey tasting in Row & Co, and that was a lot of fun. But we did a few solid days before then as well. And we do that in Croatia too. You know, we're increasing the amount of stuff that they will actually meet up themselves. As Liz was saying, you know, it's about building those connections. But it's the other online stuff that we find is really, really effective is the offline stuff that you do online, like crafts or painting, or we did origami, you know, meditation actually on the wellness side. But all of those stuff that you'd like is just stuff that you can do, that you don't feel like you're on a Zoom call or you're participating in something like that. But the offline stuff has gone down really, really well. But I mean, we're experimenting and lashing a whole lot of stuff at people, and we'll do surveys and find out what worked and what people definitely never want to do again. But we also have my co-founder and CTO Dara used to be a barman, so he's been, especially during COVID, he was giving a lot of cocktail making lessons. And they were a lot of fun as well, because they were somewhat creative, but there was a bit of an element of booze involved too.
I like you've 2 boozy events there, whiskey tasting and cocktail making. I'm making note. Graham, will you put them in the chat, please? I think it's great that you're trying different things, and that's really important, isn't it? But like, you're also capturing feedback, so you're not just throwing things at the wall to see what sticks, but you're actually checking in with the employees afterwards to see what they think. So it's so important.
Yeah, otherwise you end up doing a lot of stuff that, like, it's a lot of work, you know, it's a lot of planning, and it's a lot of measuring feedback and to just make sure that you're actually delivering something that people actually want, you know, and that works for them. What's
been the most popular?
The craft stuff, I think, is really popular. People tend to bring their kids along, you know, and we do a lot of lunch and learns as well, which are fun. But we're big on all hands. Like, I just came off an all hands before this call. We were just going kicking off Q2 with it. But you just have to have opportunities for people to get together in different types of ways, I think, and then different people will actually warm to some of those things more than others. And not everybody has to show up to these things either. You know, it's just more about building different opportunities to connect. Certainly with new team members, we grew a lot over the last year, and it's been one of the things. We did, as you said, a wellness month, and it just provided ways for people to connect that, you know, were a little bit outside of their day-to-day. So I think that's important as well.
Yeah, I think so. And Liz, Cheng, I think you mentioned you're in APAC. Are you the only remote employee that's living near you in your area, or are there many of you close in proximity to each other?
In my own observation, most people are I think the people located in APAC are kind of like the minority, not only in my company but also in the whole remote labor market. And based on my observation so far, I am the only person working from Hong Kong. Yeah, so hoping that more remote workers will join us from Asia.
That's really interesting. And I know because like we're remote, we also have one colleague who's in Lisbon. She's the only one in the rest of us. I think the rest of us, yeah, we're all in Ireland. So how do you yourself in that situation as an employee as well as in your role, how do you keep yourself connected, or what are remote doing to help you feel more connected?
So we have virtual events that are scheduled in different time zones to ensure that employees from different time zones get the chance to connect together. So even if we have fewer APAC employees, the number of events that are scheduled for us is not less than anyone. So this is something which I really like. So I'm not like sacrificed because I am like the minority here. And also personally, I enjoy the virtual meetup quite a lot because I am not a very extroverted person and I'm not a very active person in conversation. So when we do those chit chats or social activities online, usually it is like having a facilitator and people speak one by one. And in fact, to a non-native English speaker, so English is like my fourth language. So it takes quite a lot of efforts for me to hear and also understand what's going on if I am in a very crowded setting. So in my opinion, it actually works better for me when we hold those meetups online, or when we hold it online, or when we are also given the equal chances to meet with each other. So I have been enjoying this kind of virtual events scheduled for my colleagues and myself so far.
Great. And I've heard from other employers who say that the attendance at the virtual events is much higher than it would have been if they've been doing face-to-face pre-COVID, because people have it's a little easier to join in if you have a little bit of free time in that day, and you might think, oh, that's an interesting topic. So even I've heard from other organizations that their groups, like say they may have a women in tech group or an LGBTQI group, and that the attendance at those events has actually gone up because they've moved to online. So that's really interesting. And your point about the personality differences too, like not everybody likes to go to the bar after work and socialize, but maybe more likely to join a virtual thing. So I think it just opens up a lot more opportunities for people to get together in different ways. So I think that's great. Liz, Coralli, if you look at your own organization at HubSpot, so there's the events and there's getting people together, but there's also more to engagement and making sure that employees feel engaged with their work and with their colleagues. So from a manager's point of view, how do you think, or how are managers at HubSpot driving that engagement? What kind of things are they doing, or how are they working in that setting to make sure that people feel engaged?
Yeah, and we're doing a lot. I think we're getting even more intentional now about empowering our Manager Plus community to understand what the myriad challenges are in a hybrid culture, and how they can support and help their hires feel engaged, or their direct reports. One thing that we do is our Manager Plus community, there's a couple of things that they do, but one is creating a psychologically safe environment. I think that when you establish psychological safety on your team and you really empower folks to use the flexibility that is core to HubSpot's values, people feel more engaged, people feel more inspired to do their work, but they also feel more empowered to take time when they need it so they can reset and come back feeling rejuvenated and refreshed. That's something that flexibility, kind of at the heart of it, is really where our Manager Plus community, I think, shines, and they encourage folks. Take the afternoon, take the day. Do you need to step away and go for a long walk? And when they're setting up that environment of promoting that, of encouraging that, I think not only does it make their employees feel safer and more comfortable going to them when there are issues or when they're not feeling engaged and saying, hey, I've not been focused at all today. Could you help me reset? Or I've done a lot of work today. What can I do to kind of refocus for tomorrow? And we also have some peer bonuses that we give out quarterly. We have peer recognition and quarterly awards that we give out to make sure that people are feeling affirmed in their decision to continue working at HubSpot, to make sure that people are feeling appreciated and valued. And I think those things can go a long way. Yeah,
I think there's a sense with managers in remote teams sometimes that they have to keep too engaged, almost in a way. They overdo the communication, and there's a balance, even though a lot of people say you need to over communicate, but there's a way to over communicate, right? So what you're talking about there, building that sense of psychological safety, that doesn't mean you have to be, on contact with the person every hour, checking in and setting up meetings with them all the time, right? It's not about the amount of communication, it's the right kind of communication, right?
Yes. And I mean, the amount of anxiety that I think an employee can get when their boss pings them on Slack and says, hey, do you have a quick second to chat? And there's zero context. I mean, my heart drops, right? But if you have a relationship with your manager or your supervisor or any of your peers, and they're saying, hey, not urgent, I have a question for you. Could you let me know, and give a timeline? So when we think about, even Liz has talked about this a lot, time zone inclusivity is so important. If you are asking someone to give you an answer, giving them an expectation of how urgent that question is and when you need it by, and being really, really intentional and aware of how that person likes to work during the day. Do they take a long lunch and work later in the afternoon, or come to work earlier in the morning? Do they have a different set of working hours than you do? Setting those expectations and laying that out can do so much just to continue sharing and promoting that sense of communication and community.
That's really interesting. And I think that you touched on something there that's not always said, which is often we hear, well, if you just let everyone know in the company that we're async, and that if someone sends you an email, you don't have to answer straight away. But I think that each communication actually spells that out each time, so that it's a kind of constant reminder. Look, I'm sending you this now, but you don't have to answer me straight away, because you can't assume people understand that culture just because you've said it once and then and then it doesn't happen, right? Because people kind of don't feel like they have the power to kind of set their own schedules. So I think it's that constant repetition in every communication is really important, what you said there. Claire, I'm going to bring you in to this conversation. So for one of the most important things with engagement and keeping people engaged is that it happens from day one, right? So you bring in a new hire. And again, this is a challenge. I'd call it a bit of a myth or a misconception about remote working, that it's harder for new hires to feel connected, and it's harder for them to feel engaged because they're not getting the same opportunities for mentorship or for, hearing other people on the phone, or, listening to conversations, that sort of osmosis that can happen in the office. So what do you think about that? And what are you doing at Axonista to get people up and running and engaged from their first day?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great area. Like, I guess for engagement, what you want is you want an empowered team executing on strategy. So we are trying to put as much structure around things as possible to allow people to then just do their best work within the structures, but know what the structures are. And I think that's the main thing that what Liz was saying there is, like, the guidelines need to be really clear on how to do these things, and the tools that people use, because there's so many different tools that you can use that can help with remote work, but you have to be all using it the same way, or at least know how you're using it. And I was just smiling there at the sort of context for comments coming from, because I'm the CEO. So if I say something, then somebody's probably not going to ignore it. But I think I write not urgent so like 20 times a day, because I've just kind of thought of something and I think I'll tell that person that thing. But not urgent is the first two words, just in case I'd send them off and then some different track. But it is really about trying to, for onboarding, I think you know, it's creating a little bit of community from the start within the organization and making them, you know who their person is. And we have a great person on our team, McHugh, who really helps a lot with team onboarding as well, and works with the hiring manager and whoever is in place. So we're actually, I think it's really about automating that as much as possible so that it's more of a self-guided onboarding, if we can self-guide it. And we use Bamboo HR, a combination of Notion, a combination of some videos that we already have. You should watch these and get it, and we try and keep as much content every time we're making pieces of content, so that people onboarding in the future will have the same sort of level of information as other people who've been in the organization longer. And that's challenging. That's not a small undertaking. And I think one of the things that we're finding now is that we really need to expand our operational team, particularly in our people ops team. We're actually hiring at the moment in that team to facilitate this and to make it a bigger part of our organization, so that we can empower the team to execute on strategy really efficiently and really well, and sort of get all of the, how do we do this thing out of the way so that it's just known and shared, and like, it's a big body of work and not to be underestimated.
Absolutely, and really, really important. If people don't get that sense of connection and engagement early on in their time with you, then there's a risk that they won't stay. Liz, Cheng, I'm going to bring you in to talk a little bit about onboarding at Remote. What kind of things do you guys do during that first initial phase? And are there particular things as a remote employer that you think are most important?
Yeah, so personally, I think one of the very important elements that we need to consider when we do onboarding is that onboarding does not start on day one. So it actually starts once the employee signs the offer letter, and we want those incoming employees. Oh, sorry. Maybe someone can mute himself or herself. Okay. Yeah, so we want to ensure that those incoming employees are actually understanding how we work since they signed the offer letter, and we want to ensure that they have a clear understanding of what will happen to them and what they need to do before they join and after they join the company. So what we are doing is that once the employee sign those contracts online, it triggers automation of welcoming emails, and on the welcoming email, we tell them about what they can expect 1 month before they join and 1 week before they join, and we show them checklists of what they can do. And we also encourage them to read our remote handbook, so employees get the expectation of what will happen sometime later. And we also have and virtual events called pre-day one calls. So it is for incoming employees and also some of the people from our people team to get to know each other. And on that call, we will answer our new employees' questions. And we also will brief them what they will do in week one. So in week one, in remote, every employee goes through the same set of Notion materials, which is to help them to get to know how we work, get to know our organization structure, and also get to know how they are expected to communicate, what values we stress on. So these are all done async. So they will actually experience how things work when they work async. We are trying to ask them to set least calls as possible, because they can also do that sometime later. But the cultural parts of the onboarding is really important to us. So we want to stress them on taking time to dive in. And on week 2, we will have department-specific onboarding. So the respective department will also create their own Notion pages and ask the employees to read and go through the tasks. So we ensure that there are 2 full weeks of onboarding, at least 2 full weeks of onboarding to our employees, so that they can really get the time to dive in, because we are quite a fast and dynamic company. Once they start work, is quite challenging for them to get back to those materials. So yeah, ensuring that they have time to deep dive themselves, and our managers will also do one-on-one introductory call with them, but we are trying to minimize those same calls as much as possible and let our employees to concentrate on their onboarding materials. Yeah, so this has been what we have been doing in remote.
Brilliant. That sounds really good. It sounds very comprehensive, which is really important that new hires get the attention. And I liked what you said about it begins before they start, because it is true. It's not just on day one, and it goes on longer than that first period as well. It's something that really needs to be embedded, at least for the first 3-6 months and beyond for a new hire. So that sounds really good. It sounds like you have a very comprehensive onboarding program at Remote. Liz, I'd like to talk a little bit about the hybrid model that you have at HubSpot, particularly the culture and engagement piece for when you have some people who are in the office and some people who are working remotely. And often this comes up as a challenge of hybrid. How do you make sure that it's equitable, that it's fair, that everyone has equal access to opportunity, that everyone feels that everyone has the same experience when they're not really having the same experience? So how do you figure that out at HubSpot?
Yeah, the insolvable problem, right? Because our company is 5,000 plus people worldwide, and we have distributed global teams. Majority of our teams are not based in one region. And even within that one larger region, you have some people who choose to work at the office, some people who choose flex, where they're going into the office some of the time and staying home some of the time, and then folks like me who are fully at home. So I think this idea about equality versus equity is really important to keep in mind. It will be, you will die on the hill of trying to make the exact same experience for every employee across your company. It will drive you mad because you want to have an amazing experience for everybody. The experiences are going to be different. Just by where I live, my experiences are going to be very different from the folks who are going to our Dublin office. And that's not bad. It's just different. So the challenge that we have is thinking about, okay, when we take this holistically, globally, when we're thinking about the company as a whole, how do we bring in everybody? And that is really leaning into virtual offerings. But when it gets down to our smaller teams, before I joined the People Ops team, I was in customer success, and my team was small, but we had folks in Australia, in Dublin, in Berlin, and across North America. And we were doing activities that were offline, to Claire's point a little while ago. So they were the same activity. They were all offline. So we would all go to the botanical gardens in our particular city. And then we would have a meeting together where we would share pictures from the particular place that we went. We would talk about our favorite thing that we saw there. And so we were creating a shared experience, but we were having that experience in person without our colleagues right next to us. So that's one thing that we've tried, I think, to varying success. Some teams really like that, and some teams are not as big of a fan of that. But I also think that recognizing that you can do things in person, as long as you are not intentionally excluding your colleagues who cannot come in person. So if we're doing events in person, it should be open up to anyone in that area. It shouldn't just be, hey, your small team is doing a dinner, but there are 2 people who live in Denver and Sydney, Australia, and they can't join this dinner that we're having in Dublin. That is exclusionary. But if you say, hey, we're having a dinner for anyone that's in the Dublin office, that is where it gets different, because Denver might offer a different in-person experience. Sydney might offer a different in-person experience. So being really intentional about how are we bringing everyone in, and are we really making sure that this isn't excluding anyone inadvertently? And I don't know that we've come up with the perfect solution yet, but we're getting a lot of feedback on things that teams are liking and larger departments are liking as well.
I think it's really interesting what you said about the equality versus equity, and it's true. I think if you try and everybody has a different experience for many different reasons because of their perspective. So you can't have a cookie cutter, one size fits all approach. I think it's just about the how you're communicating it and the fact that you're leaving things open to anyone who is able to join. That's really important, that you're not excluding people. But yeah, you can't. And I think some companies they really tie themselves in knots, thinking, well, everyone who comes into the office gets a subsidized coffee. So what do we do? Oh, other people don't get subsidized coffee. So how do we replicate that exactly? But you can't, right? So you have to be more creative about those things too, don't you? About trying to make sure that people have similar benefits and similar opportunities, but it's not going to be the same opportunity.
Yeah, and some of the benefits, right, are go beyond some of these like community building cultural things. I think when you open up the world to a hybrid model like we have at HubSpot, you're able to recruit and bring in the most talented people, regardless of where they live, and also regardless of a myriad of factors. Having a hybrid model allows you to have an accessible workplace for talent that might not otherwise be able to come to a physical office for whatever reason. It opens up talent to folks who are caregivers, who have young children, or who are taking care of older family members. It gives you so much flexibility in bringing in the absolute best talent that you can. And then if you do a really, really good job of being intentional about that inclusivity and the culture and those engagement points, then you're also retaining that phenomenal talent as well. So it's gonna end up working out for you in the long run, but you have to be really, really intentional every step of the way.
I've lost count. I haven't been counting, but I think the word intentional has been said in this meeting so many times, and I say it myself so many times. It's about not assuming things will happen organically and not just letting them happen and evolve, but actually planning and being really intentional about it is so important. And I think all three of you have said the word several times, so it just illustrates how important that is. Just a reminder to everyone on the call, you can feel free to drop in questions in the chat. We're going to keep talking, but if you want to ask a question, if you want to say it out loud, you can also raise your hand and we'll unmute you and you can ask the question directly to the panel. I'm going to go back to you, Claire, because we touched on well-being a little bit. And I know at Axonista, I'm highlighting you, even though I know the other organizations also do well-being activities, but you recently had a well-being week. And I just wanted maybe to hear from you about why you felt it was important to do that and what kind of things you did. How did it work out for the team?
So it was actually a month.
Oh, a month, sorry.
So we were in Italian, and it was February. And we did a wellness day. So like we had a company-wide day off. And I think that was really, really beneficial. People just needed a bit of a break at that point. And I think so much had gone on in terms of, the pandemic and Christmas sort of being a bit of a washout, that people needed a bit of a break. And it's not an inexpensive thing to do. Even at a company our size, you have to think about it in terms of, okay, we give everybody the day off together. But it was really worth the investment for it, because, you have to plan it. You have to tell people that nobody's going to be around, and you have to create the environment in which they can take that day and that everyone is taking that day together. I think there was something just really nice about that. And people decided to, what we wanted to do was say, look, do something that makes you feel good. Like spend that day on yourself and do something interesting with it, whether that's sit on the couch, that's up to you. But it is really about finding something. And people did lots of different things, and it was kind of funny because on Slack, people were just posting during the day where they were off, but of pictures of things that they were doing that they just hadn't tried out. There was one woman on our team who had a pottery wheel that she had got as a gift and hadn't tried out, and it was her day to use the pottery wheel. So we got some photos of that from her. There was another man who was trying airplane lessons. He was studying to be a pilot. He was doing that, and there was people doing all sorts of stuff. And that was then another thing that people were talking about during coffee mornings the next week. It was just what did you do? Oh, I did this. And, and sharing pictures of what they've done, which is like, it's just creating these shared experiences that are not necessarily all at the same time, but they're a thematic thing. So the wellness month that we did, we included some activities in it. Meditation was one that went down really well. We picked February because we reckoned February was a bit of a dull month. I'm not sure if anyone's a big fan of February, but we're just like, not a lot happens in February. It's sort of, it's out in its own. Let's make it into something. And we'll have our inaugural wellness day, which is a company-wide day off, and we're going to do some stuff as well. And the meditation was really good. We also did yoga. We did some creative things and art classes and crafts, and a big part of our culture, because we work in the sort of the sphere of media companies, is storytelling. Everyone's a big storytelling fan, so that was also a theme in some of the activities that we did. But we just planned out the month thematically for wellness and tried a lot of different things and brought back some stuff that worked very, very well, and didn't repeat stuff that doesn't. But I think putting that thematic framework around it was really also helpful for people to have a shared experience. It's like, oh, what are you doing for Wellness Month? I'm doing this. Or did you like this activity? Yeah, I did. And for people joining the team during one of those months, it's something to talk about that is completely not work related. And we've taken that thematic approach to other months now. So not every month, but April is going to be a growth month. It's a company growth month. We're kicking off some new initiatives internally for the company, but we're also looking at personal growth and career development. And one of the things that we're doing, which is again one of these shared experiences, but a little bit different, is a book club. So there's a budget for a book. You can buy it in whatever format you like to read or listen to books. And we are sharing our experiences of, like, I'm picking a book that has some kind of personal growth element to it, something you want to learn more about, but also sort of reviewing it at the end. Not everyone's reading the same book, but it is really, really useful and helpful to see the different types of books that people are reading and what they're learning more about. And, actually just the flow of chatter about recommendations from people on the team is like, oh, I have this great book. If you liked that, you'll probably like this, and and that's great. It's facilitating this extra communication and shared experiences with people who people aren't necessarily working with in the day-to-day. And that's really what we're trying to create, is like opportunities for connection. Because if you're not going to be, in meetings with somebody or in a team with somebody in a remote first environment, you have to have opportunities to connect outside of that, and that you really need to lean in to create those for people.
Definitely. And Liz, Cheng, how important do you think it is from your perspective at remote to focus on employees' well-being, mental health, wellness at the moment, particularly?
Yeah, it's so important to us. I mean, well-being, no matter physical or mental ones, it helps employees to become more resilient to stress. And it benefits us in many, many ways. Like, it improves our thinking, our decision-making, and also how we interact with work and also colleagues. So we have been encouraging our employees to have a really healthy work-life balance and really spend time out of work. And actually, we on our remote handbook, we have stated that we are not a family. Always prioritize your family for the first. And we see on our employees' calendars quite a lot of events every day. They just put their time of family time and also gym time and also meditation time or yoga time on their calendar. So we encourage employees to explicitly let us know about their needs of having their own self-care time, and we respect that. So we really avoid having meetings at that time. And when employees have events on the calendar, on their Slack, it just shows that they are doing something else. And because we are also async environment, it's not necessary for us to receive any answer immediately. So yeah, I mean, well-being is definitely very important to us, and we are doing our best to accommodate to flexibility of our employees.
Brilliant. And just, I'm going to ask Liz Coralli, have you seen an uptake in requests for support or a need for additional support at HubSpot over the last 2 years?
I think that every company has felt the last 2 years and has understood in a way that we never have before the necessity to prioritize mental health. HubSpot has been investing in some mental health and well-being initiatives. A couple of things that we've started in particular in the last 2 years is we don't have any meetings on Friday. So no meetings Friday, which is especially in the last 2 years, and even more so as we lean into hybrid and remote models of work. Zoom fatigue is wild. And it's important to have some time to do some deep work, to really focus, to reset, to prepare for the weekend even when you're not having to go in and out. So no meetings on Friday has been one thing that we've tried that, no surprise, our employees have loved. We also, similar to Claire and a wellness month, we do some programming throughout the year where we bring in mental health experts. We call them Hub Talks, where we have folks from outside of the organization come and chat on well-being, wellness, and mental health. We also started this last summer, and we're continuing it again, which is a global week of rest. So we, in July every year, shut our company down for a week. And the only thing I don't like about it is that it lands the week before my birthday. So I really wish that they'd asked me before they picked the week. But we really, and like Claire said, you have to be really communicative with your customers and with the community to make sure that people understand what the expectations are, that you're doing this so your employees can come back refreshed, rejuvenated. They don't need to think about Slack. They don't need to touch on those things. We also offer sabbaticals every 5 years of employment for a month for employees, and we really encourage them to take that sabbatical. We ask them to take email and Slack off their phones. We ask them to just shut it down and go and enjoy whatever you do. We have picture books and photo albums of folks and what they've done on their sabbatical. So people do a countdown towards their sabbaticals, which is great. And we also offer unlimited PTO, which is part one of what's important. Part two is genuinely encouraging your employees to use that paid time off. I think unlimited PTO can sometimes fall companies into a trap of employees feel like they can't take that time off. But that starts with our Manager Plus community, making sure that they say, hey, you have unlimited paid time off. Are you getting your work done? Great, you are. You need a break? Good, take some time off. Take a week, take a day. Do you just want a random Wednesday off to get some errands done and to play with your dog? Please do that. So encouraging stepping away. And as Liz said as well, really, really emphasizing a work-life balance where life is the priority. I mean, we already prioritize work in that phrase. So how we think about reframing that and making sure our families and our friends and our personal well-being comes first, because that's going to make us a more holistic and better employee.
That's amazing. I love the time off the week, the shutdown of the week, and the sabbatical after 5 years. I think that's a really fantastic opportunity for employees to really reset and not have sometimes you feel if you take a week or 2 weeks off and it's just your vacation time, you feel almost guilty for taking the time off. But if the whole company is closed down, then you're free to completely switch off, which I think is really fantastic.
And you don't have to worry about coming back to a million emails or a ton of things on your to-do list, because the expectation is nobody should be communicating with anyone. Everyone just go to the beach, go to the mountains, hang out, rest.
Yeah, absolutely. I see this
one
idea. It's great, isn't it? Are you going to implement it there?
I think, yeah, like, you know, it's for smaller companies thinking of doing these things. I think the thing to think of is it's an investment. It's an investment in your team. It's an investment in your culture. and it will pay dividends over time, but you have to sort of treat it that way. Like not everybody's going to be able to do something on that scale, and it's okay, but it's just kind of starting with something that people really do appreciate it as well.
Yeah, and I think it does pay dividends, because you're going to have better, more engaged, more motivated, more productive, happier employees who aren't going to leave, who aren't going to burn out. So there is a reward for the company, as well as doing the right thing and taking care of your employees, which is also a responsibility. Just, you mentioned small companies, and I'm conscious of the time. We've only a minute or two left. But Claire, I see there's a question there as well from Chris about the budgeting of your wellness week. Maybe could you give like a minute on how a smaller company could do some wellness activities? Was there a lot of a cost involved? Was there a lot to organizing it? Maybe a few tips for anyone on the call who might be interested.
Start small with something that is going to be fun for the team, but do treat it like an investment. Treat it like another team activity that you would be running for the same purposes, and it's just about that, and then get feedback. Did you like it? Should we do more of this? Should we do less of this? Some other things, because it's always you never really know what the employee experience is when you're in the senior leadership team or a company owner. So you have to really make sure that it is landing in the right way, and that the people aren't just turning up because they feel they have to a forced fun event, which isn't really fun. So it's just start small, do something. It doesn't have to be anything wild, but and then build on it from there, just based on what works. That would be my advice on it.
I think that's really good advice, and it doesn't have to be anything too expensive or time consuming. You talked about a book club. That's a very simple thing that we've been doing book clubs for years. It's a very nice traditional way of getting people engaged. So I think those small steps can actually have quite a big impact. Okay, so I'm just conscious we're up against the time. So unless anyone has any other questions in the chat, we can close out the call today. So I just want to say a big thank you to our guests, to Liz, and to Claire as well. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. It's been a really informative, interesting conversation, and I hope the attendees on the call have enjoyed it too. And big thanks to Graham and Grania as well for monitoring the chat, especially Graham doing great work capturing the insights. So that's it. I think we can say goodbye, and thank you all for joining us today.